Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so honored to be part of San Diego's very first Design Week. Thank you, Design Week, for including us in this. I'm Angela, and this is Chris, and we are Noble Intent Studio. And today we're going to be telling you a little bit more about website accessibility. We have a little presentation to go through, and at the end, we'll link to that as well so you can have all these resources. So again, website accessibility, all about creating a more inclusive internet through website design and development.
So Angela and I started Noble Intent Studio in 2011, and we've been building custom websites ever since. A few years back, one of our clients, Cucina Restaurant Group, just came to us with an issue they were having about website accessibility, ADA compliance on their website properties, and asked us if we could help them out. This is something that we then began doing a lot of research on, and what we learned was that it's very intertwined with SEO best practices, and that you could do a lot of small changes such as implementing skip navigation or color contrast, alt text, things that you may have heard of, and it can make a really big difference for accessibility and the usability of websites.
So today we're going to tell you a little bit more about what accessibility is, talk about assistive technologies that users with different abilities use to use websites, why accessibility is important, and then we'll jump into some tools and strategies you can use to help make your website more accessible. And then we'll close with some resources you can take home. So what is accessibility and what does that mean on the internet?
So making your website accessible means making it better for everyone. Sometimes people think that it's extra work or something that's only going to help a small subset of people, but we like to think about it more like this picture, which is of a curb cut. The reason that it's there is because of legal requirements for people with wheelchairs to be able to get up curbs. But in the end, it ends up making life better for everyone. No one wants to step up that curb. And if you're on a skateboard or a stroller, it's much easier. So you actually are unlocking a whole lot more ability for people to use your services if you help the people who need the most help.
So accessibility is achieved when a website's content is available to everyone and also can be used by anyone. And there's really 4 types of impairments that could come into play when someone's trying to use a website. They could be visual, cognitive, auditory, or motor impairments. These all might affect people's abilities when they're using your website. And keep in mind too that disabilities can be temporary, permanent, or situational. When we think about temporary disabilities, it could be maybe an injury. When we think about a situational disability, it could even be driving in your car and needing to use hands-free technologies. Or something more permanent that we think of more stereotypically as something like color blindness or visual blindness or low vision. And when we think about these things, what we're really going to be focusing on today and in the context of website accessibility is really primarily visual, since really your visual senses are what you use when you're using a website for the most part. So we'll dive into a little bit about assistive technologies. These are anything that people use when they need help with something. So even something as common as glasses is considered an assistive technology or an assistive device. A walking cane, a wheelchair, a magnifying glass. And like we mentioned, users, it could be situational, permanent, things like hearing aids, anything could be considered an assistive technology. Some of the things that we use in loud settings could be closed captioning to be able to read the audio coming from a video or a TV. So one of the things we're going to be mainly talking about here today is an assistive technology called a screen reader. And here's what that looks like.
So a screen reader is essentially a piece of software on your computer that will read you what is on your computer. And if you're blind, this is a major help because you can't see the screen, but it can help people with low vision or dyslexia or other impairments which make it hard to read what's on the screen. So this is what it would look like to load up a website and use a screen reader to help you navigate.
Google COVID-19 advisory for the health and safety of meetup communities. We're advising that all events be hosted online in the coming weeks. List 6 items. Visited link image. Meetup home link. Start a new group 50% off link. Explore link. Messages. Visited link. Notification 6 link. Unlabeled image. Profile. Heading level 2. Your next event. Visited link. Computer website accessibility. Creating a more inclusive internet through design and SDXT, San Diego Experience Design Professionals Network 134 UXers Wednesday, June 17th at 6:00 p.m. online event. Google.
So you can see that, basically what happens is the screen reader will just read top to bottom what it finds on the page. And we'll give you some tips on how to make that the best experience possible. Behind the scenes, what it looks like is just using a keyboard to do the navigation to control the screen reader technology using tab. And it's really not too hard to learn. Anyone can learn it on a Macintosh or on iOS. There's actually a really cool tutorial. It's built into the software. I encourage you to try it if you have access to one of those devices.
Accessibility. Google heading up link. Skip to the press link. Heading level 3 link. Result options. Collapse. Red spots menu. No items in red spots menu.
So you can see you don't need a screen and you don't need a mouse if you're using these screen readers.
So we just wanted to show you this most common assistive technology that users typically use, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about today relates to building your website in such a way that those technologies can use that. But first we want to talk about why accessibility is important. So the current state of accessibility is really not acceptable. Only 2% of the internet is fully accessible. And this is based on a study that an organization called WebAIM does. They update it about every other month. They basically survey the top 1 million homepages on the internet and provide, basically what those accessibility failures are. So these top ones: color contrast, missing image alt text, empty links, and missing form labels. We're going to talk through what all those mean and how you can solve for that. But ultimately, we really need to do better, and there's really a lot of low-hanging fruit, and implementing quick, simple fixes can go a long way for usability. And before we dive into all of these specific things that we can tackle, we really want to show you a few reasons why accessibility is important to your business, other than, of course, the inherent benefits of being more inclusive. So we encourage you to shift your thinking away from avoiding lawsuits or specifically adhering to ADA compliance rules, and rather towards striving for accessibility for all users. Because when you put accessibility first, it will result in ADA compliance and result in protection from lawsuits. So there's a few business benefits beside those. Chris touched on these a little earlier, but it really improves your SEO as well. I mean, when you think about it, what we discovered was, we're coding websites in the correct way, keeping SEO in mind, knowing that it's not only humans and users that are going to be reading the information on your website, it's also Google's bots and other crawlers that are going to be reading this. Essentially, they're the same as the technologies that visually impaired users use. So when you solve for one, you solve for the other, and ultimately, you end up reaching a wider audience as well. So there's a few tools and strategies. Like we mentioned, there's some low-hanging fruit to find and fix these high-impact issues.
So some of the things that can make a really big difference but aren't too hard to do from a development point of view is to check your color contrast, make sure you have alt text on images. If you have links, make sure they have labels. The same goes with form fields. There's something called a skip navigation that we're going to show you what it does. Make sure you have a logical outline order. And then another thing that we like to do is add an accessibility statement to your website. So let's kind of go through these. So the first thing that we usually do when we're checking accessibility for a website is to use a tool called Google Lighthouse. It's a free tool, and it's what Google uses to kind of automatically check your website and score it for accessibility, speed, SEO, and other best practices. And these are all pieces of information that it uses when calculating what your page ranking will be. So we're going to actually run an accessibility audit with Google Chrome's native tool, Lighthouse. I'm going to just show you just how easy that is to run. So if we load up, say, our site, for example, we're going to click inspect, right click, inspect. It's going to bring up this developer panel. We're going to go to Lighthouse. And we're going to go ahead and generate an accessibility report. You can also run performance, SEO, other things. Right now, we're just going to do accessibility. Give it a couple minutes. And you see that we got a 95, which is considered very good, but we definitely have some things to improve. So it found a couple things in our heading, a tab index issue that we can fix. Some of this has to do with our WordPress bar because we're logged in right now, but there are things such as color contrast and some of our links here that can be improved. So this allows you to kind of check what's failing, drill into it, see what could we do here on this element and fix it. It's a really great tool to start out. It's important to remember that it's not going to find everything. There are some manual checks that it reminds you to do, and you definitely need to do this. It also gives you resources, but it's a really great first start. It can give you an example of how we're doing, like terrible, okay, what can we do to help it? So with color contrast, there's a couple tools. If Angela, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, color contrast is typically the top issue, and it's actually the easiest to fix. So there's a tool that I like using. I have a link to it here, WebAIM's Color Contrast Checker, where you can actually just type in what color values you're using, the hex values, and see, do those pass or fail? And if they fail, you can kind of just adjust the lightness or darkness to ensure that those pass, and then pop in that new color value to your design or on your live website. And there's a few different considerations too, like for your text size, is it large or small? So you'll see some different parameters around that in this tool, but I use this all the time when I'm designing, and we use it in audits as well to just test things.
So the reason why color contrast is so important is because people have varying degree of color perception. I used to think about color blindness as you either see in color or you see in black and white, but the truth is it's way more complicated than that. In fact, most people who have color blindness, they can still see in colors, they just look differently than they do to people who have different color sight perception. So that's why this lightness to darkness contrast is so important, because you might see something in green and I might see it in red. And it's important to make sure that that contrast is there so that things don't blend in. What this screenshot is showing is all the different types of color blindness that you can simulate with the Chrome plugin that we've included a link here. There's going to be a couple of links throughout this, and at the end we're going to give you a link back to these slides so that you can find all of these resources. But this one is really cool because it lets you check out what does a website look like under various different color blindness scenarios. Image alt text is another one that you probably have heard of, and it's basically just a way of giving descriptions to screen readers, and that gives missing context for users who can't see or understand the image itself. So this also can help Google and other SEO bots to kind of determine what's the content on your page. So I'm going to show you real quick what it looks like when you don't have alt text and a screen reader is trying to explain an image.
Heading level 4, 3 item. Or you can just stay here and look at this cute photo of Chris and Layla, /404.png, unlabeled image.
So you can see what it does is it reads you the name of the file, but with a little bit of alt text that can
Look at this
help.
cute photo of Chris and Layla. Photo of Chris with Layla, Dexter and Angela in the background of the office image. You are currently on.
So in this case, we actually just explain what's in the image. That can help if you have low vision, or if you are a robot who has no vision, or if you are a user who just relies on a screen reader. So this problem of alt text can be especially hard with user-generated content on social media. So Instagram and other social media sites try to automatically add alt text, and what they do is they put it through an AI algorithm and try to say, okay, what is in this picture? And so let's listen to what they think is in this picture.
Seeding Sovereignty's link. Seeding Sovereignty. Photo shared by Seeding Sovereignty on June 10th, 2020, tagging at We're. Image may contain plant and nature. Text that says, Black lives don't just matter. Black lives inspire. Black lives uplift. Black lives bring beauty. Black lives spread wisdom. Black lives revolutionize. Black.
So you can see it actually did a pretty good job of determining that it has plant and nature and reading the text that it found on the image. But it doesn't always work, and sometimes what happens is they won't be able to provide an automatic alt text. Here's an example on Instagram of it trying to read the screen reader trying to explain what a video is.
Our Planet Dayalis profile picture, buttoned, link, Our Planet Dayal, 103289613114153217020932702093289478337 _n.jpg question_nc_ht equals fc_ent-x2-1.cn _n equals _nc_ht equals 5jsf9 and equals c on 274316880314555c2480 and equals 5ee364e6
and on. And the problem is that they're using an extremely long file name, which is going to end up trying to be read by a screen reader. So in this case, you'd be better off with no alt text at all. But what you really should be doing is adding your own alt text. All major platforms provide a way to do this so that you could explain, this is a funny video of a bear scratching its back, rather than having Instagram try to use AI to determine what it is or possibly fail and provide a terrible user experience. So link descriptions is very similar. So as you are using a screen reader and tabbing over links, they need to know what this link is, and so they'll try to read that out to the user. A lot of websites use icons, and if you don't provide context on what this icon is, it can provide a bad user experience.
Back to search results button, archive button, report spam button, delete button, mark as unread, snooze button, add to tab.
So this is actually from Gmail, and it actually is a really good example. They've provided labels across all of their buttons, and so you can actually tab through, and in some cases it's even more informative with a screen reader than just looking at it and be like, oh, a stop sign with an exclamation point, like what does that mean?
Archive button. Report spam.
It means report spam. So that's actually very helpful, and it would be even helpful to people who are fully sighted who might not be able to decipher what your icons mean. So skip navigation is another example where it basically allows you to get to the content faster if you're using a screen reader. So imagine that you are coming to this website and you want to read the content. Like, let's think about how long that will take to get to the actual content.
Google Go. COVID-19 advisory for the health and safety of meetup communities. We're advising that all events be hosted online in the coming weeks. List 6 items. Visited link image. Meetup home. Link. Start a new group 50% off. Link. Explore. Link. Messages. Visited link. Notification 6. Link. Unlabeled image. Profile. Heading level 2. Your next event. Visited link. Computer. Website accessibility. Creating a more inclusive internet through design and SEO.
So it took about 30 seconds just to get to basically the title, what a sighted user would just focus on naturally. We had to go through the advisory, we had to go through an ad, and then all of the navigation. But imagine if you really understood and knew the site that you were on, you wouldn't want to go through that every single time. So here's an example of what a skip navigation can do. So in this case, let's imagine that the user who's using a screen reader wants to learn about the events. So the first time through, they're going to go through all of the navigation.
Visited link. Skip to main content. List 9 items. Visited link. Visited link. Visited link. Group dining. Visited link. Events. 4 of 9. Press.
So we click
Visited
on
link.
that.
Events. Visited link. Skip to main. Press. Visited link. Skip to main content. Heading level 2.
So in that case, we were able to kind of skip straight to the main content once we were on the target page. And that's something that you can do with that a developer can implement. And like I said, it does make a really big difference when you're using a screen reader. When I was recording these videos, sites that did have that made a really big difference. So one more thing to think about is what is the outline order of your document? And what we like to do here is think about if you were designing your website in Microsoft Word, how would you do that with headings and table of contents and links, and making sure that it still makes sense top to bottom, structured in an intuitive manner. So in order to do that, it helps to kind of remove all the images and videos and styles from your website and see what it looks like. We can see that we still have navigation, we still have our list of links, and we use a plugin called Disable HTML in order to kind of look at that and just make sure that it makes sense. Because in the end, this is how a user might see it. If your CSS is broken, they still need to get the information. And it's how SEO robots such as Google would see it. And it's how a screen reader reads it top to bottom.
So one of the last things we recommend that's a quick fix is adding an accessibility statement to your website. So, during the past couple of years, there's been a focus on privacy policies and disclaimers, accepting cookies, all the sorts of things we've started to see as new laws come out. So this is just another thing that I would recommend adding to the footer of your website along with those policies. And we encourage anyone who's working to improve their website's accessibility to include this type of statement. And we have an example of what that could look like here. There's a few examples I show as well. I noticed the article website has accessibility right in the header, in fact, where you can, reach out to them if you do have an issue and you're unable to kind of find what you need or navigate the site. They have a way to contact them. That's, I think, the key as well. And this helps with protection from lawsuits as well if you are showing that you're at least making an effort and you're making these considerations and these ongoing improvements, and you're basically just being helpful to the user at the end of the day. So, you know, kind of to close, thinking about the internet as accessibility and really access is power, think about what's going on right now in the US and around the world in regards to schools during COVID-19. It's a lot easier for some students to go home and learn online, but for others who may not have internet access or their own devices to use, it really becomes either impossible or very challenging for those people. So we really have to acknowledge that access is really the key to equality and inclusion, and that's especially true on the internet. So accessibility supports social inclusion for people with disabilities, as well as people who may live in a rural area or a developing country, or who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and have varying degrees of connectivity. They don't, you know, have high-speed internet or fast devices like many of us are fortunate to have. So we really need to think about all those things when we think about building websites, and including that in our accessibility thinking. So let's build a more inclusive internet. We hope you'll join us in that mission. We have some resources for you. Like we mentioned, we do provide accessibility audits. Then we can evaluate the accessibility status of your current website if you want to take a look at that. But like Chris mentioned, there are some tools where you can kind of begin that process pretty easily on your own. We also provide third-party audits during a design and build process. We were fortunate actually to work with our presenting sponsor, Mingay Museum, and Raygun, who built the San Diego Design Week website that we're all using and loving. They brought us in as a third-party auditor during their design and build process. And we basically, you know, went through and audited their in-process development site and said, hey, Raygun did a fantastic job. There's just a few small things, you know, that could be slightly improved, but it was really cool to see that Mingay had that top of mind and really went the extra mile to provide accessibility for their guests. So we also have an ebook that I wrote at the end of last year that just goes into more depth about all the things we've talked about today. That's free to download on our website. Please share it with anyone that you think might be interested in this. And of course, contact us, connect with us. We'd love to talk more about this if you have resources to share or need any help. And we also have some resources here. So you can find a link here to this presentation to have all those resources at your fingertips. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll hope to meet you in person sometime in the future.